Good evening, everyone. My name is Mayra Torres, and I am the Assistant Director at el Centro de Estudio Puerto Riqueño, and I thank you for being here tonight, where we will pay tribute and recognize 6 leaders in public service. As part of our 40th anniversary, Centro will host many affinity events such as this one, and these affinity events will serve 2 purposes. Expand the collections and broaden the scope geographically and in the fields of accomplishment that are in some cases underrepresented in our archives, and it will celebrate local contributors to the community who have made a difference and wish to share their stories. In other words, tonight we honor these men and these women, not only as Puerto Ricans who have given so much to our community, but these individuals have agreed to donate their papers and other memorabilia to the Centro archives. They will follow in the footsteps of many other well-known and not so well-known members whose papers already reside in our archives. And this is very important, because it is to Centro's archives that those present and future researchers, historians, writers, and scholars will look to learn about our identity, accomplishments, and our impact in the U.S. So by virtue of what they've done, they've become part of our history. The history of the stateside Puerto Rican, a community that is unique, vibrant, and that needs to be remembered and acknowledged. And before we begin, on behalf of Centro, I would like to thank the donors for entrusting us with their stories, for allowing us to preserve and retell it to future generations. Allow me to introduce the Director of the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, Dr. Edwin Meléndez.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
¿Estamos bien?
Muy bien.
Me alegro. Antes que nada, yo quiero agradecer al comité organizador. Let me ask you something. Everybody still Spanish, or should I switch to English? No, okay, I'm sorry. Okay. I assume everybody speaks Spanish. No figure. Well, thank you very much for being here tonight. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this event. Mayra said a little bit about the affinity event that we're celebrating tonight. I just want to start by thanking all the people who help us organize this event, the donors themselves, Carlos and Sara and Ronald and Luis, missing someone here, but also John Villamil. Where's Johnny? Johnny, thank you very much for helping us with this. And Jim. Jim was honored. Jim, say hello. Jim was honored as a military 100 Puerto Rican about 2 weeks ago. It was very emotional. In any case, this is the first that we celebrate out of New York, but in New York we already celebrated the National Puerto Rican Day Parade. Past presidents, we celebrated labor leaders, we celebrated cultural organizations. Am I missing someone? So far, but we have about 20 of these events throughout the country. It's very important to us. This campaign for the 100 Puerto Ricans should complement all the holdings that we already have. We have our 250 collections already. We have a commitment, folks like the ones that we're honoring tonight. We have about 50, almost 60 signatures of people that committed. We need to reach 100. And before the end of the year, we're going to reach that goal. And then the hard work starts. We have to conduct oral histories with them. We need to process all those papers. We need to make them available to the public, digitize them, make them available to the younger generations. And for that, we're putting together a number of educational products. In the back, you all saw the posters. That's one of many other, in your packets when you go out and you pick up your folders to go home. You're going to see a lot of brochures for other traveling exhibits, film festival. We have produced about 4 films in the last year and so. So we want to convert all this data that we collect from them and all the oral histories into tools that our next generations can use, our younger generations can use to actually understand the heritage and the culture from where they come from. The Center for Puerto Rican Studies is very proud to be celebrating our 40th anniversary. That deserves a round of applause. 40 years of conducting research. We have published more than 50 books in our 40 years of history. We have a journal that has produced more than 600 articles to contribute to all the areas of the Puerto Rican heritage. We celebrate events. We put events on all kind of things year-round. So we're very proud of sharing the Puerto Rican experience and engaging people outside the Puerto Rican community to understand what we do, where we come from, and the contribution of our leaders. In any case, I don't want to take a lot of your time tonight, but I want to say that this event in Washington focuses on public service, very important. People that contribute to government, people that have contributed to non-profit organizations and so forth. We're honored to have with us too Congressman Bob Garcia. He already gave us his paper. He actually secured a grant to process his papers, and we have 4 archivists working on it right now so that he can work on his memoirs and help us disseminate the seed of our culture. In any case, I think that's all I have to say, right? Correct? So I don't know what kind of mistakes all the time, but thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. And now we'd like to introduce the honorees. We're going to start with Ronald Blackburn-Moreno. President and CEO of Aspira Association, Inc. Blackburn-Moreno formerly worked with the College Board and the Quality Education for Minorities Network in Washington, D.C., developing mathematics and science academies across the country. He has served as assistant to the president of the Ana G. Meléndez University, Director of Development of the University of Puerto Rico, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at Inter-American University, and taught political science at Catholic University of Puerto Rico. Wow. Blackburn-Moreno has served on a variety of national advisory boards. He's actually on our board as well. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Puerto Rico and a master's degree in politics from Princeton University. Ronald?
As I told Edwin, first of all, thank you very much. As I told Edwin, I have a 20-minute speech. I'm going to bring it down to about 5 seconds. But I do want to make the appropriate points. First, I want to thank Centro for the award, and I want to congratulate the other awardees. They all, by the way, are very good friends of mine. Maybe I've been around too long, because when they start honoring people, start looking soon. There's a story I was telling Edwin and I said on the video. In 1970, which is 43 years ago, 3 years before Centro was founded, I was an adjunct professor at the Department of Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College, the predecessor of Centro. And I taught a course on the Puerto Rican politics in New York. Nobody had written about it, and it was a hard course to get. Really hard. So I want to thank, recognize some people who are here, especially my wife, Evelyn, and my family. All the way from Virginia to be here. Thank them very much. Of course, someone I admire who's already been recognized is a very good friend of mine, and who's made a crucial contribution to the Puerto Rican community for many, many decades. And it's my good friend, Bobby Garcia. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Oh, I just forgot one thing. Edwin mentioned that they're going to digitalize all the papers. I have very few papers, actually. So I'm going to give them to Centro in a hard drive.
Thank you. Our next honoree, Carmen Delgado Votaw. Has been a long-time advocate to civil and human rights and a leader in the advancement of women. She retired as Senior Vice President to Public Policy for the Alliance to Children and Families. She previously had been an executive with the United Way and Girl Scouts, a former president of the Public Members Association of the Foreign Service, Delgado Votaw, served as staff and volunteer for several organizations devoted to women's issues, including as president of the Commission of Women of the Organization of American States. She serves on the Montgomery County Executive's Latino Advisory Committee in Maryland.
Buenas noches. Are we having fun yet? Yeah! Well, I am honored to be here, especially in this absolutely fabulous company of friends and fellow honorees. I am so thankful to Hunter College and the Center for Puerto Rican Studies for having undertaken this task that will be a significant step for the Puerto Rican community in the future. That task of collecting the stories and footprint of 100 Puerto Ricans preserving our history has been long overdue. So congratulations, Edwin Meléndez. As Santayana said, and I paraphrase, those who do not collect their past history are condemned to repeat it. It is complementary to what Virginia Sanchez-Corral has pointed out in her reflections about the publishing of her book, From Colonia to Community, The History of Puerto Ricans in New York City, 1917-1948, which she wrote some 30 years ago. Although Puerto Ricans had lived in New York City, she said, before the turn of the century, their historical footprints were seriously absent from the records. She reminds us that the histories of Puerto Ricans in countless communities remain unwritten still. It is time to document those histories. Inscribing our past empowers our future, enables us to better negotiate the complexities of the present. So it is thrilling that the Center has taken up this facet of documentation of our footprints. I trust this will be a very successful endeavor. And this occasion brings to my mind the passing of a historian and feminist, Gerda Lerner, who passed away at the beginning of this year at the ripe old age of 92. In her living history, she poses a question: how does knowing our history affect our potential to shape our future? For women, she was relentless in insisting that women be co-creators of history. And so this opportunity that the Center gives me a little bit of entry into the Puerto Rican herstory that we need to continue. One of the most fulfilling aspects of the tasks I have imposed on myself is shedding light on the achievement and role models Puerto Rican women have created. And my book, Puerto Rican Women, does just that. even though it has never been in the bestseller list. The fact that I labored in English and Spanish to amass the modest paean to women who give us pride and reaffirm the worth of females in our society. That has made me conscious about how little we actually know of our ancestry and how much less we do to make others conscious about it. So I'm about making you all conscious about the great contributions of our women. Although many of my papers are in the Schlesinger Library and at the Hudson Library of Hood College in Maryland, I am determined to this project so that it will capture the essence of the Puerto Rican diaspora and provide access to resources and documentation about our treasure trove of history and culture. I am humbled by the star cast you have assembled here. I'm very proud to be in their company. Thank you, Centro, for polishing the luster of the deeds my colleagues have accomplished.
Our next honoree, Sara E. Meléndez. An educator and promoter of not-for-profits, Dr. Sara E. Meléndez currently is a partner in Savage, Meléndez and Associates, consultants on philanthropy and nonprofit management. As CEO of the independent sector, a coalition of over 700 foundations, corporations, and nonprofit organizations, she promoted volunteering, citizen action, and increasing the visibility for not-for-profits. She earned a doctorate in education from Harvard and taught at Boston College, Harvard Graduate School of Education, and the University of Hartford. She also served as Dean and Vice Provost at the University of Bridgeport and is Research Professor of Nonprofit Management at the School of Public Policy and Public Administration of George Washington University, D.C. Dr. Sara Meléndez, please.
Thank you all so much. You may not believe this because I've had probably more than my share of the limelight through my career. It still embarrasses me. I'm not comfortable in the limelight. But I tried to squirm out of this and they wouldn't let me. And I have to say that I am humbled and honored to have been selected. And your job is very easy. I never thought this would happen, so I haven't been very good about collecting all my stuff. You know? But I'm at a stage in my life when I thought, by the way, my wonderful son and his wife are here for me today. And so, for them, I have been trying to start purging stuff, so they don't have such a bad job when I'm gone. So now this comes at a good time because I will put all this stuff that I think you might use in one spot, you know. So it'll take me a little while, all right? Plus, this also gives me the push that I needed to stop procrastinating about writing my family's history. Because my mother was a remarkable woman, one of many, but she was really remarkable. She came to this country at the age of 24, left 3 children. She was 26, I think. Anyway, she left 3 children with her mother in Puerto Rico and came here and became a seamstress in New York City. She had a 3rd grade education. My father had no education and he stayed behind because he couldn't leave his mommy. I'm sorry. sorry, that's the truth. But anyway, he was nice, you know, but... oh, I know what. He sang beautifully. And he sang a serenata that captured, you know. So. But anyway, so she came here and she worked. And you know what? She became shop steward. That was in the 1940s, late 40s, she became shop steward. And then years later, a number of years later, she became a contractor. She rented out a factory and became a contractor for her boss. And had her own little factory hiring other Puerto Rican women. And I did the bookkeeping and I learned to run all the machines. So, anyway, that is the story that I have to tell. Because the most important thing is that with a third grade education, she pushed education. Which is why I got into Brooklyn College, which was free, and then was able to get, I would not have gotten any of my degrees without fellowships and scholarships because she died when I was 39 and left me with my younger brother and sister to support me. So, do you think that's a story worth telling? Yeah! Thank you. I promise to go back and work on it, and then Gala's going to turn it into a play, right? So thank you so much to the Centro for all the work that you do, for, you know, if somebody doesn't write it someplace, it never happened, right?
That's right.
So you're writing it and you're making it available, and that is wonderful, and I thank you. Thank you all.
And I'm the affinity coordinator for Centro. So we're going to present now Luis Nuñez. So let me just read a little bit of your bio. Luis Nuñez, long and distinguished service in the public and not-for-profit sectors focused on minorities, particularly in the Hispanic and Puerto Rican communities. He served as president and CEO of the National Puerto Rican Coalition and was national executive director of Aspira. He currently consults on development, public policy, civil rights, and the impact of the growth of the Hispanic community on our society. On the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, he served as deputy staff director and was later nominated and confirmed as the director. A native New Yorker, Nuñez served in the Army and graduated from the City College of New York, which awarded him an honorary doctorate of humane letters. Presenting Luis Nuñez.
Hey, good to be with you. You know, when I write my bio sketch now, I say former. It's been a long life. And my life, in a way, parallels the development of the Puerto Rican community in the United States. I grew up in New York, in East Harlem, and someone asked me tonight what was one of my important stepstones in my life. It was when I moved to the East Bronx in 1942. You know, from the East Harlem area to the East Bronx, in those days, was actually moving into the suburbs. You know, we know what the East Bronx turned out to be, but it's, by the way, it's improving a lot more now. The 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the development of the Puerto Rican community, I lived all of that. I lived at the founding of Aspira with my great mentor, Antonio Pantoja. I saw it develop from a local organization on the west side to a national organization today, which is perhaps the largest and most prestigious educational organization in the total Hispanic community in the United States, of which we ought to appreciate Ronald Blackburn's work in that area.
Rodríguez is former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Department of the Treasury during President Clinton's administration. He has dedicated more than 35 years to serving the people of Virginia, Massachusetts, and the United States in human service and public institutions. He has worked as a community organizer, educator, human resource specialist, law enforcer, planner, policy developer, and senior political appointee at the city, state, and federal levels. A graduate of Goddard College in Vermont, he earned his master's in sociology at Indiana University. He was the first full-time Loeb Fellow at Harvard's Graduate School of Design and earned a Doctor of Administration from Bridgewater State University. Alez Rodríguez.
Thank you all for being here, and thank the Centro and Hunter College for bestowing this honor on all of us. There are many deserving people in the community who ought to be recognized. In fact, many years ago, Virginia Sanchez-Crowell and I sat together after both seeing a movie. The movie was The Emperor's Club. Some of you might remember it, with Kevin Kline, in which he challenged his students to remember their history and to write it, because he reminded them of Shantruk Nahavuti, who lived 1158 BC, who conquered all of the Eastern world at the time. And he was so proud, and he wrote, "I am Shantuk Nahute, king of Ashantu and Susa, sovereign of the land of Elam. By the command of Ashunak, I destroyed Sipa, and I took the steel of Nilan Singh, and I brought it back to Elam, where I erected an offering to my God, Ishanik." You heard of him? Didn't write the history. Didn't write the history, so nobody's heard of him. And if we don't write the history, nobody cares about us. This is history. A role model came to Massachusetts when I was on the Civil Rights Advisory Committee in the 70s. His name was Louis Nuñez. He came and he inspired us as what we can do, the change we can make if we stuck to it. We did. We made that change. Sara Meléndez, she came and she said, "Hey, you're doing good stuff. I want to interview you for my dissertation." So when she contributes her papers, she'll be talking about a Puerto Rican in Boston who worked in the civil rights movement, who marched with Dr. King, who gave protection to Dr. King. I spent 1965, I dropped out of school at the time to give him protection. And she wrote about it. And it's in her dissertation, right? I didn't think it would go anywhere. There was this young student who came and said, "Hey, I want to interview you." I was the chairman of the Commission Against Discrimination in Massachusetts at the time. I was committed to erasing the isms that Ms. Votaw speaks so well about, the exclusion of the whole gender from our life. I've been dedicated most of my life to getting rid of the isms. I started my doctorate work and working on that as racism as a mental illness. I studied under a man named John Spiegel, and from the Spiegel catalog family. And he was the head of codifying mental illnesses around the world, so that schizophrenia in China is the same as schizophrenia in the United States. And I said, man, I've got an opportunity. Let's make this crazy stuff called racism, sexism, homophobic-ism. Let's get rid of this stuff. Let's tell people, you're sick when you do this. They didn't buy it, didn't write the dissertation. But I struggled for it. And I struggled because we know where we come from. You know, Latino's not a race. Puerto Rican's not a race. We come from other places. My daughter just gave me the test. I took the DNA test. She wanted to know. So I did it. I sent it to California. I'm 52% European. I'm 38% Sub-Saharan African. No, not to laugh. I'm proud of that. That's my mother's side. You know, her people came from Nigeria.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 7% Native and 6% Asian. And where'd that come from? From those who walked over the ice pack 8,000 years ago, who gave us the Arawaks. They didn't come out of thin air. They came from someplace. We all came from someplace. We have a common ancestor. All of us in this room, living in a place called Kazakhstan. It's called the Niazov family, and we all share their genes. That's where we all stopped to come here. So, but still, all of us in this room, in one way or another, practice the isms. We're either sexist, we're homophobic, we're racist, we're ageist, we're anti those who are not well of body. We practice the isms one way or another. We can't get rid of it. We use the way they. We talk about them. It's easy to fold that. So it makes me understand from whence I come and proud to receive this because we are people who come from all those people. And years ago I wrote a poem about it, and I'm going to read it to you. It's called Living in La Raza. Living in La Raza is a realization that we're not Asian, Indian, black, Spanish, or white. We are mestizos, half, quarter, or even eight breeds. Always realizing that the concept of race is silly. We are all mankind. We live with the tension of the melting pot that doesn't melt. A mixed salad that has ingredients many don't like. We carry 6 races on our shoulders. And we're asked to pick our favorite. Many of us choose. I am Puerto Rican, except in Puerto Rico. I am black, except in Harlem. I am Indian, except on the reservation. I am Asian for my Asian roots, but my Asian cousins can't see it. I'm Spanish, except in Spain. And I'm forced to betray the white man that I am. I celebrate my ancestors' cuisine, but depend on my wife and sisters to eat it. My children can't cook it. Oh, how I long for my mom's rice and beans. I'm a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, and sometimes self-hater when I try to take sides. I want to be none of these, so I try not to take sides. The society drives me to pick, choose. What are you? Where do you come from? What about your grandfather? Where did they come from? Be like me. No, be like us. No, we're better. I'll be your friend if you let me tell a racist, sexist, homophobic joke. Well then, what about a dumb blonde joke? I hear you know that's a Puerto Rican thing. Said right in front of me. I get rejected as Latino, but then I get called to translate. They believe language is genetically passed on. I bond with those who want to be anti-racist and all-inclusive, but they are not. They're like me, struggling to figure it out. They don't see that we are winning. They don't understand how it's all going to be settled. I have an advantage because I'm the kid who ran home crying after being beaten up and called spick and other racial epitaphs. I'm the one who asked the wise woman, the spiritualist, the one who cures, my mother. Mommy, what would happen if everybody intermarried white with black and Asians with Spanish? She stopped her ironing, thought for a while and said, well, hijo, if that happens, the whole world will be Puerto Rican. I will deny none nor favor any. I will be all. Through me you come. With me you get there. I am a bridge. Crossover.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Our next honoree is Carlos E. Santiago. Dr. Carlos Santiago joined the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education in April 2013 and serves as the Senior Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs. He is former Chief Executive Officer of the Hispanic College Fund. Dr. Santiago was the first Puerto Rican president of a major U.S. research university, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. He was Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University at Albany, SUNY Albany, and functioned as the Chief Operating Officer of the campus. Dr. Santiago has over 30 years of experience in public higher education. He earned a master's degree in economics from the University of Puerto Rico at Rio Piedras and a master's and PhD in economics from Cornell University. Carlos Santiago.
It's wonderful to join this august body of people that I've admired throughout my career. It's good to see good friends. I suffer disadvantage here. They're wonderful speakers. I have a cold, and I'm the one person between you and either dinner or drinks. I will be very, very brief. As a good Puerto Rican, it's always important to acknowledge familia. My wife, Sara, is in taking the pictures. We celebrated our 39th year anniversary last Saturday. I need to acknowledge my sister-in-arms, Margarita Benitez, who's hiding back there, who has been a wonderful colleague and friend for many, many years. Let me mention something about the Centro. When I went to Cornell in '76 after leaving Puerto Rico, and then stayed in the United States because in 1980, when I called a colleague who was chairman of the economics department at the University of Puerto Rico, and I said, Jaime, I'm ready to go home. I have my PhD in hand, there's a lot to do, I want to go home. I want to go to UPR and to work. And his response, he said, Carlos, nosotros encantados en tenerte aquí, pero no hay plazas disponibles porque nadie se ha muerto. And in some ways, that's how our diaspora continues. But the Centro was always an important light for many of us as academics. Edwin and I know each other well. We're both economists. We're about the same age. And in those early years, in the 70s and in the 80s, there was no other institution outside of Hunter College, outside of the Centro, that provided us the space to do our research and that took us seriously and allowed us to work on important questions about Puerto Rico. So we owe an enormous debt to El Centro, from Frank Bonilla, the founding director, to Edwin Meléndez, a good colleague. They kept these doors open for academics. And now we have a whole cadre. The Centro was important in our developing in the early 90s, the Puerto Rican Studies Association that continues very, very active. But I did want to acknowledge one of my colleagues here, Luis Nuñez. Luis talked about the report that the Commission on Civil Rights did in the 1970s. And that report, which was about the socioeconomic status of Puerto Ricans in the United States, was really sobering. They concluded that Puerto Ricans were the one immigrant group in the United States that was not achieving the American dream. And they said it, and they said it strongly. And by the 1980s, the papers like the New York Times and Nicholas Lehman would write about the Puerto Rican underclass. And they wrote it up a whole population as an underclass. And in 1990, Luis Nuñez, heading up the Puerto Rican Coalition, decided to commission a study. And it was a risky venture. He commissioned a study and he basically put it out for an RFP. And the study was to look, using 1990 data, what had happened to the Puerto Rican population since the mid-70s in particular, when New York City went into default, to the 1980s, where the data showed that the community had really fallen in socioeconomic terms, to then the 1990s. And he commissioned the study, and I was fortunate to win that commission with my colleague Francisco Rivera Batiz of Colombia. We did a study, and the title of the book was Puerto Ricans in the United States, A Changing Reality. And the study demonstrated for the first time that Puerto Ricans were not an emerging urban underclass. That Puerto Ricans were an emerging population that was moving into the middle class. that the Puerto Ricans were moving into, with 2-year degrees, were moving into professions, becoming teachers and becoming firemen, becoming policemen, and moving out of New York City and looking for a cheaper housing stock. And the income per capita of Puerto Ricans by 1990 was growing faster than it had for most other groups, all of the Latino groups and most other groups in the United States. And I have to credit Luis Nuñez for having the vision and the courage to say, now is the time to study our people. And for the Centro to open the doors to allow young academics to be able to do that without worrying about whether we would get tenure working on topics of Puerto Ricans, but allowing us to have the space. So I want to thank you all. This is a wonderful project, and I'm very proud to be part of it. Thank you.
We have the honorary sitting with us, and before I introduce him to say a couple of words, I just want to fill one little thing I omitted, which was to introduce my wife, Betty Baca. There she is. And most of you know her. I thank Saint Sonia for her. As you know, I met Betty 27 years ago in Israel, and she was Sonia Sotomayor's roommate at the time, and that's how we got together. So that's why I thank Saint Sonia. And we've kept a friendship with Sonia since then, and most of you who know us know that. But another person that I met over the phone, in 1971, I got a call from an aide from, I think he was senator at the time, Congressman? State senator from New York. And I said, why does a state senator from New York want to talk to me? We had just passed the first mandatory bilingual education law in the nation in Massachusetts. I wrote that law. And I got on the phone with Senator Bobby Garcia, who wanted to know what we did and get a copy to me. And I sent you a copy, and they passed it in New York. And this guy later on shows up as the congressman from the Bronx, and we have known each other since, worked with each other since, and I admire him. We all admire his bride. She's here in the room somewhere. But now, he who mentored us has been asked by us to say a few parting words. I give you Congressman Bobby Garcia.
I'll be very brief. The reason why I'll be very brief is when you're 80 years old and you get elected under the original Voting Rights Act of 1965, and today is 2013, you cross many bridges. And I think the best thing I can say about all of these folks here is they never closed the door. The door was always open for people to follow them. And I think that has to be the shining example of what we're all about. Mrs. Rodríguez, when I was first elected to the Senate in 138th Street in the Bronx, said to me, ¿Cómo te sientes ahora que vas a ser el primer senador en el estado de Nueva York? And I said to her, ay, señora, más importante que no soy el último. And I am writing a book, and I'm well into it now. We've got about 8 or 9 chapters put together. We've all been given a great gift. It's a magnificent gift we have, to be able to serve others. And yo soy hijo de Rafael García, pastor de la iglesia tesalónica, 141 en St. Anne's Avenue. My dad, whenever he met somebody, he would always say, su servidor. So if we don't ever forget that we are truly servants, and that we are blessed with being able to serve and help others, we will never go wrong. I'm a firm believer that it really is a heck of a lot better to give than to get. Because at the end of the day, it's all his anyway. You can't take anything with you. But to all of you here, I appreciate your help and support over the years. And, because there were times during those early 60s that we were marching and fighting for things that we never thought we could accomplish, that we did accomplish. And so many here, and especially my friend Nuñez, I remember sitting in his, such a great man. You know, congressmen, senators get all the glory, but the people in the trenches don't even, for the most part. I've always said that, and I believe it. And every one of these folks, they never had title of office, but they have his title for the service they have rendered to our community. And the other good part of it is at the age of 80, my wife Jane and I, who are here somewhere, while everybody's leaving Puerto Rico, Jane and I have moved back to Puerto Rico.
Many thanks to you all for being here, helping us honor those who deserve to be honored. Buenas noches, let's hang out for a little while. We still have some wine and refreshments, so thank you for coming. Buenas noches.